News Review.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the People's Podcast. This is the second episode of News Review. I'm Roderick.
I'm Hassan.
I'm Marshall. Let's jump right into it.
So, we're looking at three topics today. We're going to be looking at the Trudeau SNC scandal. We're going to be looking at the school scandal in the United States. And we'll be also looking at the Boeing 737 MAX 8 aircraft problem.
All right, so we're going to be talking about the Trudeau scandal here. Nothing is completely proven. A lot of it's hearsay for the moment, so keep that in mind. But there's a lot of strong evidence that what happened was SNC Lavalin was bribing the dictator in Libya to do business. A somewhat fair thing to do, because to do business in Libya at the time, you pretty much had to play the game. However, you still need to enforce the law. And so Trudeau essentially wanted to give them a better deal, because how it was going to go was that they wouldn't be able to bid on any contracts in Canada or Quebec, and that would essentially put them out of business or be a massive damage to them. And Trudeau obviously wanted votes in Quebec, and he's an MP from Quebec, so it would have hurt him very badly had this happened. So his Justice Minister, Jody, wanted to actually go with the law and do that, but he was pressuring her to kind of give them
Allegedly
pressuring her to give them a remedial deal, it's called. So basically just say, give them a slap on the wrist, essentially. It's give them less of a punishment.
Yeah, because what Trudeau allegedly wanted Jody to actually offer them was a deferred prosecution agreement instead of having them face the full extent of the law. Now, I think what we should really start asking is how big of an issue is this really for the Trudeau Liberal government, and will it impact them in the next upcoming elections? Aston, what do you think?
Well, I do believe it will impact them, but I also believe that this is not a big thing. In a month or so, it's just going to be blown over. Most Canadians are probably going to forget about it and move on with their lives. My big concern is how this is going to play out on the world stage and what it will do to Canada's reputation in front of other countries, especially Saudi Arabia and China, and how they'll have some sort of conversational leverage over Canada about being soft on corporations, which Trudeau, as you said before, just slapped him on the wrist. It was not much of a punishment.
It should be noted, just to interject here really quickly,
Right.
that they actually didn't get the remedial agreements. They essentially got the full-on punishment.
All right.
Okay.
Well, I have to agree with Asin that in terms of Canadian voters, I don't think there will be too much of an impact, quite honestly. Because if we look at the latest polling on Calculated Politics, we see that the Conservative Party has actually pushed ahead at 37% to 33.1% for the Liberals. Now, yes, the Conservatives are ahead in the polling, but you would have thought that a major scandal that would be election or devastating to the future election of the Liberals would have the Liberals losing massive support. I'm talking in the 20% range. Instead, we see a drop of like 6-7%, and this is really like a knee-jerk reaction. So like Aston said, this is a thing that I think will be a scandal for a month, and it may be brought up still, but in terms of actually impacting the government in the long range in the future, for future elections, I don't think it'll have too much of an impact. But I do kind of see this as an issue because I'm a huge advocate for transparency in governments. I find that governments should be honest and should reveal all their dealings. Of course, that's not the case, and this is why governments tend to suck. And specifically in this example, I think it kind of reinforces a narrative that's been developing within Trudeau's cabinet of elitist and corrupt behavior. Like earlier you had I don't want to use the word scandal with Bill Morneau, but you had the ethical dilemma with his holdings overseas. So I see a reoccurring trend happening here, and this kind of, is kind of hypocritical to the Liberals' narrative that they want to be a transparent and open government when we have a lot of shady dealings like this happening.
Well, I'll agree with Roderick on the fact that Trudeau's administration has some elitist tendencies to it, at least with regard to the media. There was also, too, something he did mention, happened a little earlier in the administration, was that he went to an island with his family, and it was basically looked like he was just getting a gift from a millionaire. He got a free vacation on his island, and they had a lot of talking then. So there was a lot of controversy about that. Something I think we should also note is the evidence, like although it's allegedly, obviously, there's a lot of very strong evidence. Maybe we'll post this in the description, but I have a bunch of quotes in front of me and a bunch of testimonies that show that it pretty much happened. There may be some disagreement about what exactly was said, but it's pretty obvious that that is what happened. And I disagree immensely on that this is going to be forgotten in a month. I think this is definitely going to come up on election. I think they discount the fact that right now the Conservatives are trying to play the good guys and not be too crazy about it. But when election day comes, you can bet that all of these elitist things, especially this, is going to be coming up, and they're going to be pushing it a lot. And that's going to be front and center in the debates, and it'll be top of mind for voters, I think. So I think it'll have more of an effect than we acknowledge.
Well, actually, I'm gonna have to disagree with you here. I don't think the actual happening of the event itself, like Trudeau's pressure on, well, alleged pressure on Jody Wilson, is actually going to be what would be remembered, because I still don't believe this will be remembered all too well. But what could be is the aftermath. Like, we had the what is it? The council today. This is March 13th. And there was a council called to discuss the whole event, right? And the Liberals quickly wrapped it up and they shut it down. And then all the Conservatives and the NDP members in the council were screaming, cover up, cover up. So I think, if anything, if the parties were going to talk about how this is an issue, they would talk about the aftermath and how the Liberals haven't handled it well and how they've been shutting media out, they've been trying not to discuss it, and they've been trying to minimize it. That's where I find your point. But the scandal itself, I don't think is that big of an issue. And another thing that I think we should really try to touch on is the fact that Jody Wilson were able to step down, which is kind of momentous. If we're going to talk about some of the issues in this, the fact that the minister actually stepped down points really poorly on Trudeau, don't you find, Asim?
I do too, because like it shows that I do believe she was pressured, even if it's allegedly claims, right? But she stepped down because she thought that she couldn't be doing her job anymore as a general attorney. Just going back a bit to what Marshall was saying about how some things will come up. I do believe some things will come out, but this might not necessarily be the most big thing. I do believe Trudeau's promise to reform the election and then how he broke it will come up. I see that as a big thing because there's a website you can actually go on online, and it shows you the promises that the Liberal Party has basically promised to do. And there's some that shows you that they failed to do, some that they have achieved, and some that they're currently doing or in the process of doing. Now, you can search it up online. It'll come up first thing, and you can see for yourself the amount of promises that the Liberal Party has failed to achieve. And the biggest thing would be the reformation of the election process.
I agree. That's actually quite an interesting look at it. And on top of that, to kind of further the point that I don't think this will hurt them too much, the Liberals weren't going to win a majority government next election. I think we can all agree on that. But I still don't see a way that they possibly lose the next election. If we look at the other candidates, you have Andrew Scheer, who has the charisma of a wet paper towel and has no real stances besides Justin Trudeau is bad. Justin Trudeau, bad man. And he just criticizes him and doesn't offer anything in rebuttal. Secondly, nobody really knows who Jagmeet Singh is. I mean, outside of people who are actually constantly involved and interested in politics, and even those, hell, I didn't even know the majority of his stances until a few months ago. So I don't find he's able to bring everyone together. And you also have to realize with a lot of things is a lot of people, not myself, but a lot of people are quote unquote uncomfortable with somebody religious leading Canada. I find it's kind of nonsensical, but those are views that have been raised by a lot of individuals, and we have heard it. It's a shame, and I'm not endorsing that mindset, but it's something we have to be conscious of. I think we should denounce it, but it is apparent. The Green Party has no chance whatsoever. They only
get one seat.
One seat.
Yeah.
Okay, but they are polling well in the Maritimes, mind you, but it is the Maritimes.
Green.
And then we have the People's Party, which I will probably end up voting for. Let's go and deregulate the economy, but I don't see them getting above 15% of the vote, and that's being generous. So all this means is the Trudeau government will still win and still have a minority government, so this can't really hurt them that much.
in my opinion, there's a few things to note. Not only did the Roderick described it as monumentous that the Justice Minister and former Attorney General kind of left cabinet, but we should also note the Health Minister, Jodie's friend, also left cabinet.
Oh.
Another big thing, and she left it explicitly because of what happened with Jodie. And another thing to keep in mind is another woman of color left the Liberal Party pretty much just then. She didn't do it for any reason related to the scandal, according to her. But it still doesn't look good for Justin, and you can bet even if it wasn't related directly, it's going to be brought up in the election cycle. Roderick brings up a good point. Very poorly handled by Justin. He's just not making any statements. No one knows what's going on. It looks like they're just being silent, trying to cover it up, trying to smother the story. So yeah, I think that's going to be remembered quite poorly. And I think when his election promises came up from last campaign, that's really going to be a big topic. Speaking of campaigns, Justin Trudeau came in with his father's name, so obviously, yeah, there was a lot of clout that came with him. People knew him. But I don't think we should make assumptions about Andrew Scheer, for example, about, oh, people don't know him or what have you, when he hasn't even started his campaign. This is the most important part of getting your name out there and promoting your policies, and yes, he hasn't started it. His campaign hasn't started. So I think this is a criticism that gets brought up a lot in Canadian elections, where people will say, oh, well, you don't know the opposition leader's name, there's not enough known about him. And I think people forget, they have a short memory, that this is pretty much the case for most elections. It's not usual that we know everything about the opposition party leader and everything they are proposing this early in the game.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's great about a free country, right?
Yeah.
I hate to cut you guys off, but let's move on to the next topic. Now we're going to be talking about the Boeing 737 crashes, the MAX 8 aircraft. So 2 MAX 8 aircraft from Boeing have recently crashed, one in Ethiopia and one in Indonesia, I believe?
Yeah.
Correct. Killing over 150 people in both crashes per the CBC. And this has caused a lot of countries to ground planes, well, jets of that matter, including Australia, China, Russia, and the US now, I believe, as well.
Yeah, and Canada.
And Canada.
Yeah.
So I want your guys' feedback. How monumentous, how big, how detrimental do you think this will be to the company itself and to people's confidence in the aviation industry?
Well, the people's confidence in the aviation industry is famously they're famously underconfident of what they should be. It's really quite safe to go on airplanes generally,
Yep.
and people have a lot of fear about it. But I don't think this will help it. This will obviously hurt everyone economically. However, though, as some of you may know, Bombardier is a major airline manufacturer in Canada, and though they're generally pretty incompetent and they always need money from the government, this might be an opportunity for them. We'll see if they take advantage of it. I doubt they will. But they definitely have an opportunity here. We might see some good things in Canada because of this. And yeah, just the nature of this, if you don't know, is essentially 2 planes have crashed, and many pilots have been reporting that there is a problem with the plane. When it's taking off, the autopilot tends to put the nose of the plane down. Mm-hmm. And obviously not a good thing to do a nosedive as you're taking off. So
it's a problem when the pilots are not being listened to, and the plane is being set off to its destination without the proper maintenance to it. I feel like there should be ramifications against the country, the corporation or the company that own these jet flight. I can't even talk. The Boeing 737s. Right. I feel like it's a big thing. It's a big concern. It affects so many people. A few members of the UN have been killed in these crashes. I believe a whole family of Canadian citizens, and it's very serious. It's very
tragic.
serious.
Yeah,
It's very tragic as well.
One thing I do want to touch on is when we're talking about the ramifications, especially for Boeing, there is potential for huge loss. Like if we look at the company itself, per Yahoo Finance, it has dropped over 40 points on its stock. A drop from about a 420 to 377. So if we look at that, shareholders already see that this is a negative situation. And another thing is, with the first crash that happened in Indonesia, it was a software issue. The company had claimed that it had resolved it. No, the same issue arose in Ethiopia. So what this not only shows is that the company was negligent in the first place, it shows that they were lazy and didn't properly take the time to reassure that the software had been saved. And when we go back onto Bombardier, I would rather disagree actually. Bombardier has proved to be extremely incompetent, has proved to waste tax dollars time after time and fire employees and then proceed to give benefits to their to the CEOs and the board members. Corporate welfare should not be a thing, especially for companies like that. I'm going off on a bit of a I'm tangent right there. My bad. But what I think this could more mean is there could be more potential for foreign airlines, not Bombardier, but maybe potentially Chinese or European, airplane manufacturers or jet manufacturers in foreign markets that aren't considered typical, because I think we're seeing the end of the United States' technological superiority coming to an end sometime soon. Not immediately, mind you, but within a few decades, I think it could be a much more level playing ground. Now, whether that's beneficial or not to all individuals remains to be seen, but I think this is just one of the many telling signs to show that United States technological dominance isn't as strong as we once saw it or knew it to be.
Well, I think those are pretty grandiose, sort of unsubstantiated claims. So I don't know about that. On the subject of corporate welfare, I disagree with it as well. But the justification in Canada, and I think the most reasonable justification, has been that pretty much every other country or a major Western country that has an airline does help get its government to help it. So if you want to play the game, you need government support. So
sounds like communist propaganda.
I know. I definitely disagree with it. I wish it wasn't the case. But if you need government support to play the game and it benefits Canada in the end, then I may be partial to it. You got to crunch the numbers, of course, to see, okay, well, how much does it make for us to play this game, and how much are we spending to keep playing? But I think there's definitely a possible justification. And we talked about ramifications for the company.
Right.
I'm pretty interested in ramifications for the government. So I'm not necessarily saying their inspectors did anything wrong, but people will notice Canada was one of the slowest to act, Canada and the U.S. So I wonder if this will be used to sort of diminish the Trudeau administration's response to this by saying you took a long time. People's lives could have been endangered about this. I think it was fairly reasonable that they took this long. You need to consider the facts before you make a major decision about grounding airplanes, but I think there's definitely something might come out of that. And I mean, grounding one's planes. There's Boeing has actually had its planes grounded before, or some major airline company I remember reading. And though there was some drop in revenue, it actually wasn't that detrimental to the company in the long run. So I think had Boeing just done that initially, or the government's all just done that initially before these things happened, we would have seen a less intense response, because now everyone knows Boeing has made this mistake. So we have this. This is going to be in people's minds for a long time. There may be significant effects on the company and the confidence in it. So I think this will have more of an effect than if they had just grounded it. Yeah, that's all I have to say on that.
What about you, Aston?
Honestly, there's not much to talk about besides this as being a really tragic time, for the aviation industry. But one thing that concerns me is how this would be used as a political chip in the world stage. I don't know, Marshall, you said something about that earlier. Do you really think they would use this against Canada, any other countries?
I was
talk more bad about the Liberal Party.
I don't think they'd use it. I don't think you'd see another country talking about it. I think domestically, the opposition may well say, "Look, Trudeau, you didn't handle this fast enough. This is people's lives could have been at risk."
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's definitely something to be said there.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. No.
Well, let's move on to the school scandal that was happening in the United States. Aston, do you think you could give us a breakdown, or?
I know some about it, but I'll try my best. I believe what happened was that there was a huge investigation into the college college admissions, and what they uncovered was that a lot of rich people were giving money to schools to allow their unintelligent children to pass through.
They're unintelligent.
Pass through. I remember reading it up, and one girl was given unlimited time on her SAT test because her parents gave money to the teacher. Now, that says a lot about the educational system and how it needs reforms and how we're lacking on reforms to it. But no political figure wants to do anything about it. Even in Canada, like, no one wants to touch the education system or completely reform it. So I don't know. What do you guys think about it?
Well, first of all, I think the only reasonable solution is to abolish the education system. Oh, no. Well, in all reality, this was actually extremely screwed up, and if anything, this plays into a narrative that I've been developing, that I find the United States overall to be extremely corrupt, and everything is pay to play, basically. Whether it's the government, whether
that's
it's
life, right?
not to a certain extent in the United States, it's been kind of extreme. So, like, if we look at it, for example, the amount of money that was paid to the Mr. Singer who was organizing this operation called Varsity Blues.
That's the investigation's name?
Exactly.
Right.
According to NPR, the minimum that people would be paying him was $200,000. Some amounts went as high as $6.5 million. What you have right there illustrates that the inequality to access education, especially with that. Like, if we have millionaires and people bribing people to bribe college officials and to falsify SAT results, to falsify ACT results, to falsify athletic ability, you have right from the get-go, you show a large inequality to access. Now, inequality exists, and that's not my problem, but if you're making it that people cannot access services that have terms that are already laid out, I find it extremely disheartening. And considering also because when one person gets a spot in the university, another person doesn't, that's not a problem. But if the people who are getting those spots are off false merits, then it's extremely troublesome to me, because, as I've said before, despite my libertarian leanings, I'm an extreme advocate for affordable education. Mind you, not free, but affordable, because it shows, and you can check on the CIA fact sheet, or you can check the Federal Bureau of any country. It'll show that the longer average time spent in schools, the more money on average the individual makes, which, once again, you spend more money, which is good for the economy, you pay more money in taxes, yada, 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 right? Okay, cool. So think about this for a few seconds. Considering that the average cost for an in-state student in the United States is $10,000 a year to go to a university, a state university, mind you, not one of the top-notch ones, or $25,000 for out-of-state. In comparison, for Canadians going to this is the average in total. This is between all the private and the public ones. The average is approximately $7,000 for an undergraduate degree, according to top universities. So right now, you're showing and you're demonstrating how unfair and how corrupt the United States' education system is. It's not necessarily about getting education, but it's more about maximizing the profits and not assuring the best quality of education.
Yeah, I agree. I think, especially too, just to clarify what Roderick was advocating in one sentence, and something a lot of people advocate, especially on the right, is equality of opportunity. They don't care about the outcome, but if you are given the same chance to work hard, and you're given an opportunity to do it, that's what's important. And I have to agree tremendously. I'm a budget hawk as well. I don't like the government spending a lot of money, but it's something you have to spend money on. People need to be given that chance. This is definitely just a horrible incident. It definitely sheds light on something. Hopefully, the United States can have some reform. And while this is mainly a United States issue, we shouldn't necessarily turn away from Canada. A Vancouver school and a Vancouver businessman was involved in the United States thing. But a Vancouver school is actually doing an investigation right now in admissions as well. So there's definitely some concern in Canada as well, though much less.
It's good. It opens up dialogue for other countries to think to themselves, like, do we have this kind of corruption happening in our own countries?
But just in Canada, to give a comparison about the difference in terms of cost, McGill University, considered one of Canada's best university, if not the best. There's some debate if it's University of Toronto or what have you. But for like a reasonable degree, like a bachelor's in McGill, it's about $4.3 thousand a year, which is very cheap in comparison to some of the best U.S. schools by a lot. So it allows even poor people, if they work hard enough, they get a job, maybe they take a couple loans, get a bursary, they can do that. That's a workable solution for them in the best school in Canada.
Yeah. Mind you, education isn't always good things subsidized. Like if you look at Quebec, the majority of our education system is hogwash and terrible. Like we have the lowest high school graduation rate for men and one of the lowest for women, according to Statistics Canada, despite the fact that we pay the highest taxes in Quebec. But once you get to university level, affordable education really is important, I find. And subsidies actually work for once, mind you, for once.
Yeah.
But Asin, what else do you have to say about this whole scandal in the States?
We have to look at this. I think politicians have to look at this. We have to think if there's any ways we can make any reformations to the education system. See what things are lacking, are old. I've heard from a professor back in high school. She said that our educational system is years old, decades old, maybe like 100 years old, 2 centuries old, and that we need to reform it. We need to have it equal, like Marshall said. Was it equal
opportunity?
Equal opportunities for everyone. But that also means that I do believe teachers should get paid more wages. I also I do believe more amenities should be provided to schools to give to make it so that students learn in good environments and that they can show their creative sides too, because school shouldn't just be all theory. It should also be creativity, and that's one thing that society needs as much as we can get. So this is why I think reformation of the educational system is required.
I think one thing that I don't think we touched up enough on is the fact that we need to put pressure for more anti-corruption and anti-fraud laws to be put in place, and strengthening of that system necessarily itself. Because if you look at it, a total of 50 people, according to NPR, were involved in this scandal. That's a lot of people. And the fact that it was able to slip through. Keep in mind, this was going on from 2011 to 2019.
It could be more.
Exactly.
Way more.
So the fact that this was just discovered now, considering the amount of people and the amount of money that was funneled through this whole thing, is extremely distasteful in my mind and extremely embarrassing for any country. We've been talking about the ramifications for companies and countries this entire video. Well, I think if anything, this should be quite a black mark on the United States and and its education system. I mean, I wouldn't feel quite confident in its ability. I wouldn't feel quite confident in its know-how or any future endeavors proposed. How can I trust where my funding's going if we're subsidizing research papers, if we know that these schools can't even properly see and check people's applications to these schools? It's quite an indictment.
Well, just to sort of touch on one of the broad issues we talked about recently, for the wages, teachers, it's true, do not make the most of any profession. However, they do get tenure, which makes for a very comfortable living, a lot of job security for them, even if they're incompetent, and a lot of them on tenure are. Some of them are very competent, though, and they get a lot of vacation time. Keep in mind, when students are on vacation, the teachers are working some of that time, but their vacation time is very generous, even from the get-go. And you don't see that in a lot of other jobs. And the tenure is basically like pension, like a great pension. I mean, you can just keep working and not do much if you wanted to. So there's a lot of positive things that I think teachers have. And of course, the government spends a lot of money. I think this money could be used more productively.
Right.
And though you could say ideally maybe the teachers should get some more money, I think it's not the top of my priority list.
Well, if we wanted teachers to get more money, and especially if you're advocating for that, then you'd be advocating for the privatization of schools, because private school teachers do make more money.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily advocating for the privatization of more schools, but if you are proposing something along those lines, Asin, then that would be more...
It's more focused towards like how cost of living is going up and how teachers can have a salary that comes in above it a bit so that they can live comfortably, because I do believe teachers have the hardest job in the world, and that's to raise leaders. That's to raise leaders, firemen, police officers.
I think heart surgeons will disagree.
Engineers. Well,
listen.
We
can definitely all agree that if a teacher is an excellent teacher and they put their heart and soul into it, they can do a lot. But you can also be a teacher and do pretty much jack shit. So
yeah, no, this is not to say
it's very difficult to differentiate.
Look, this is not to say that look, if you're a teacher and you get your degree and you come and you join a college and you're a professor now, you should be getting paid a good wage.
Thank you,
Boy, hold on.
Teachers are an important profession.
They are a very important profession. Another thing I just want to say is that the salary for a teacher in, let's just say, high school is what, 30 to 40,000? It's around that.
Ballpark,
sure. If you're a teacher and you get your TSL certificate, or if you have a degree and you go teach in United Arab Emirates and you're from Canada, they'll see that as an accolade, and they'll give you a wage of around $2,500 to $5,500 every month. Now times that by 12.
That's less money.
You could do the math. And
that's less money.
If you have a degree, you get
Asin,
higher pay.
You just said 2.5 grand.
I don't even care if it's more money. I think
that's the lowest. That's only if you have a TSL certificate. If you have
and
a
also
degree,
you have to keep in mind, even if you
higher.
got paid higher, the cost of living in United Arab Emirates is more expensive than Canada.
Here's what's great: they give you housing, they give you everything.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I feel like we've gone quite off topic here.
Might have, yes.
So to summarize, abolish United States education system.
A reformation is required.
We need to abolish the government. All right. No, but yeah. So thank you guys for watching this episode. If you want to follow us at the People's Podcast 7 on Instagram, we post great memes, and we also have some quality posts about what's happening around the world. Also like us on Facebook, subscribe to the YouTube channel.
And subscribe.
Smash that like.
Marshall is always wrong, and so is Asin. I am the only trustworthy person here.
Roderick flips things upside down. And he's like Australia.
No, what you need to do is abolish a bunch of taxes.
Comment on what you think.
Comment and like.
Drop a comment. 8 comments.